Hello and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm Steve Lance. White House COVID-19 advisor Anthony Fauci says he's planning on leaving his position by the end of President Biden's term. Fauci, who is already 81 years old, made the statement earlier today to another news outlet. During the pandemic, he became a household name as the face of the federal government's COVID-19 response. He often generated criticism from Republicans for his dire predictions about the pandemic. In the interview, Fauci continued to defend his public recommendations, including school closures, mask wearing, vaccination regimes, and lockdowns. After weeks of relative declines, oil prices are again on the rise today. This came after President Biden wrapped up his Saudi Arabia trip without winning a pledge from the kingdom to boost its oil output. On Monday, Brent crude, the international benchmark, was up around 5% to more than $106 per barrel. West Texas Intermediate, the U.S. benchmark, also spiked nearly 4% to more than $101 a barrel during the day. The prices jumped after the Saudi foreign minister said boosting oil supply wasn't even raised during Biden's meeting with Arab leaders, ending speculation over an output increase. The higher prices were also propped up by a weaker dollar and concerns over tight supply. Markets will be watching the next OPEC meeting, slated for August 3rd. One of President Biden's key objectives on his trip to Saudi Arabia was to bring Saudi Arabia and Israel together to combat the Iran threat. To evaluate the success of his plan, Director of Iranian Americans for Liberty, Brian Lieb, joins us to discuss. Brian, coming off of Biden's trip to the Middle East, we have Iran making some pretty bold statements saying they're capable of making a nuclear weapon. Is this bluster, or should this be taken at face value?
I mean, I think it should definitely be taken at face value. We know for a fact that they have been enriching uranium at historic levels since President Biden took office, and I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 to 70% now in terms of their enrichment levels. So 100% we should take it seriously. This is a country that for over 40 years, Steve, has been chanting for the demise of America and our strongest ally in the Middle East, Israel. And they also have been taking tangible steps to back up those threats that they've been making for decades now. So yes, 100% we need to take them seriously.
Now, Brian, it appears that part of the trip to the Middle East was aimed to bring Saudi Arabia and Israel closer together to combat the Iran threat. What does a more united Israel and Saudi Arabia look like? And do you think that this was achieved?
Well, I don't think it was achieved due to anything that President Biden or his administration did, but I do think that the Saudis and the Israelis have been growing closer together for many years now. It was announced last week that the Saudis would start allowing all Israeli commercial flights to use Saudi airspace, which I think is a win for everyone. Again, these countries their ties have been warming over the years, similar to how you saw Israel make the historic peace deals with Bahrain, Morocco, the UAE, and other countries. I think the Saudis very much want to be part of that clique. And yes, you are right, Steve. There is one thing that unites all of them, and that is the nuclear threat from Iran.
So, Brian, how has the Biden policy on Iran, when it comes to Iran, differed from, say, the Trump administration?
Well, I think that can be summed up in one word, and that would be appeasement. President Biden and his administration have done everything that they can to appease the mullahs in Tehran since they took office, whether that has been through soft language and dealing with them. It has been lifting sanctions of Iranian-affiliated companies here in America. And most importantly, Steve, it has been the Biden administration's decision not to enforce existing sanctions that are on the books that would prohibit the Chinese government from purchasing crude oil from the Iranians. So that's translated into over $1 billion a month that has gone into the Iranian coffers. And at the very end of President Trump's presidency, they had around $4 billion in international reserves, the mullahs in Tehran. And today it's reported that they have now over $30 billion in international reserves. So it's very clear to see, I think to anyone that's looking at it, President Biden has been all about appeasing the mullahs. President Trump was all about strength, projecting strength onto the world's leading sponsor of terrorism.
Brian, if I could, what are your thoughts on the Iran nuclear deal 2.0?
Well, I think it was any kind of diplomacy with the world's leading sponsor of terrorism, Steve, was destined to fail from day one. That's what's going to happen again. I've lost track of what round we're in now in terms of negotiations, but there was some talks a week or two ago in Doha, and again, that left all parties with no deal. So I honestly don't think that the Iranian regime has ever wanted to do a deal with the United States of America. I think they did a deal last summer with China that translates into $400 billion in economic investment over the next 25 years. And I believe just this week, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, will be landing in Tehran for his first official visit to Iran in many, many years, and I'm sure they're going to be announcing a trade deal. So the bottom line is that I don't think Tehran needs the United States of America anymore, and they're doing, they're giving us a bunch of song and dance, but there's not going to be any deal. The deal would have happened by now if there was going to be a deal.
Brian Lieb, thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
Today, a group of Democrats rallied to expand the number of justices on the Supreme Court. This is to force the court to reverse course after their string of conservative-leaning rulings upended Democrats. But the White House has so far reserved support for expanding the court. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the details.
From abortion access to gun rights, the government's regulatory authority, and more, the Supreme Court has issued a string of rulings that have blunted Democrats' decades-long legislative victories.
We can't assume for a second that the court is done, as my colleagues have mentioned.
Now, more than 60 House Democrats and a handful of senators are pushing a bill to add 4 justices to the nation's highest court, to force a change in direction for interpreting the laws of the land.
Expanding the court will protect us from future bad decisions.
A move that President Biden has repeatedly said he does not support. Despite the lack of support from the White House, Democrats on Capitol Hill have called to expand the court for the past year, while Republicans have painted it as a radical effort to exert control. Democrats push back that the idea is radical, citing the fact that the number of sitting justices have been changed 7 times.
We can do it an 8th time. Absolutely.
However, the current 9-justice makeup has not changed since 1869. And a repeated message we heard from many of these members is that they want to hold justices accountable if they rule differently than they said they would as they were going through their Senate confirmation hearings. We asked them if this means they would be open to giving Congress or the White House the ability to unseat justices if they did rule differently than they originally said they would. Here's their response.
All ideas are on the table. Our form of government is in need of remodeling, rehab.
And just today, members in the Democrat-controlled House introduced legislation to solidify same-sex marriage across all 50 states. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer says he will bring this vote to the floor this week. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.